Morning, Mina.
Good morning, Professor Garneau. How are you?
Good, I'm good. Did you ever get a chance to follow up on that internship?
Yeah, I'm doing it with Professor Gervich and Professor Eastwood.
Oh, excellent. So, and also, was there a summer opportunity that I shared?
Yes, yeah. The one that you just shared like last week.
Yeah,
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 that was really cool. It looked like
yeah,
an awesome opportunity.
yeah. I'll keep you posted if anything else pops up.
Awesome, thanks.
You guys have any big Easter plans?
Nothing for me.
No, I'm gonna see my parents.
That's nice.
Been
That's so
over
great.
over a year, and they finally got their second dose a couple weeks ago. So they want to see the kids. I'm very happy. And this snowstorm is like fouling it all up. It's a big day. Very exciting. Now, I can't recall if I mentioned it to this class, but I've been trying to do it in all the classes. Or did you guys all get that notification that you're going to be able to sign up for your vaccination soon if you were interested in getting them?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, I wanted to start off our day in the breakout rooms, but I might have to wait a little bit for people to pop in. So I know today is a deadline that we have for the rough draft. Are you guys close? I mean, it's not due until end of day, but are you going to be able to get some stuff in? Okay.
For me, I'll be able to get something in by the end of the day. But I think if I wanted like a really good rough draft, I might be able to use a little more time. Like I can do it to have something to submit, but if I want it to be like really what I want,
Yeah.
I might by having like one more day.
Yeah. We can do that. I would rather give you guys a little bit of extra time if you needed it than then throw in a report that's not going to be as strong for me to comment on. So I'm probably traveling today into tomorrow, and I'm going to be with family. So if you did need an extra day or two on it, you can. If you are in good shape on it, though, definitely submit it. Then I can kind of start working on them as I find those nooks of time. I just don't want us to belabor it so that we're pushing it out into the time when we're finishing up those book club presentations. So I'm fine if you need a little bit of extra time, a couple days, but if you've got it done, then that's fine to submit.
Thank you.
Yep. And it's Easter and I'm going to see mom and dad, so it's all good. All right. Okay, so we may be close to quota here. So my thought is let's get you guys back into the breakout rooms. Let me give you a refresher on what I'm hoping we can do in the breakout room, and then we'll dive into the material for climate change. So let me share a screen and have you guys open your Moodle sites. If you can head over on your Moodle site to the Overexploitation section, and if you guys could, click on the material associated with the rhinos. So there's the rhino hunter case study. There's the Wildlife Foundation's overview. There's the article that talks about the captive rhino behavior. I don't think you need to go back to the podcast that we listened to excerpts from. And this was just the IUCN, quick paragraph about black rhinos. So the most important things would be to open up the case study and then pull up these two and have them kind of on hand. So what I'm going to ask you guys to do in your breakout room, remember we had a poll, we had a question that was basically, you know, what is your stance in advance of maybe having not heard that Radio Lab? Some of you I know did hear. What is your stance on trophy hunting or hunting in general of perhaps these endangered species, you know, where you for it, against it, kind of undecided. And then we listened to some of these excerpts and perhaps hearing that perspective maybe, you know, made you change your mind or think a little differently. So I'm kind of curious how the class kind of falls out on that. I also want you to be thinking about it in the context of new conservation versus old conservation. At the end of that Radio Lab segment, we heard from Leakey, who was the anthropologist that burned the ivory, to kind of take a stand, that we have to have like a moral standing about this. So he's sort of, I guess, the old conservation camp. But then we have the hunter and perhaps some of the more wealthy that can be involved in these trophy hunts that can be quite costly, who stand on another side of the wildlife conservation spectrum. Everyone agreeing that they have deep concerns and want to conserve these species for the long term. The approaches are quite different though. So some a bit new conservation, maybe involving some of their finances to be able to support it. And then you've got the others that are kind of standing that moral high ground. So again, I'd like for you guys to, in the breakout room, pull up this case study, you know, quick zoom through, you know, reading it. I don't want you to spend a ton of time addressing some of these questions. Some of them right off the bat, you're going to be able to answer very, you know, very quickly. What's the cause of rhino decline? You know, think about their behaviors, right? Going to the behaviors, you know, looking at that article and these particular pages that speak about their behaviors when they're in captivity and when they're trying to get them to mate. So we're thinking about them in sort of that in situ conservation. We're thinking about the trends that we're seeing with the rhinos. These questions in particular focus on Radio Lab. This one, you know, speaks to what's going on that website for the Wildlife Foundation. And then here's just, you know, the town hall debate, which I mentioned in the end last time, that we had, you know, a few different perspectives. The activists that seem to be kind of anti the hunt, the wildlife biologist approaching it from sort of the, you know, logistic growth curve and who's going to be the one reproducing and is it in the long term helping the population, and then the hunter who is obviously going to be pro hunt. So in the end, you know, the big ones, after you've kind of done a little bit of time, maybe 5 or so minutes on those above questions, come back down to this. And, you know, I want you to guys to kind of reconsider that question that we originally posed. I'll put the poll up there again at the end, and maybe we can just kind of come together and talk about it. So I want us to spend 10 minutes max, so not a ton of time. I know you guys have had some time to reflect on it already. So I'm going to break you out into those rooms, probably 3 in a room, and then we'll come back in 10 minutes. Sound good? Okay. All right. Breakout rooms. Where the heck are the breakout rooms? There they are. All right, here we go.
always seeking like the bigger or more mature animal. So like that type of trophy hunting is like, that's okay as long as it kind of abides by special regulations. Now, I have a totally different opinion on, like, I wouldn't feel ever that I would go hunt a rhino because I want, you know, I want to show people a picture of me with a rhino, or like I don't know, some crazy species just because I want like the trophy aspect of it. I mean, there would always be more that goes into it, but there's like a certain degree of attraction to trophy animals, if that makes sense.
I think that's fair to say. I think you're right by saying like that as a hunter, going for the biggest, like best thing is always like the intention.
It can have like
But I do-
positive effects on the population too. Like if you're taking out mature animals, that way they are
new rhinos in that were bred in captive and stuff like that. So if you can control the trophy hunting, I guess, but like, you know, back then when people just shot whatever they wanted, it was a huge problem.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like in like the 1980s and 1990s, if you paid for like an Africa trophy hunt, they described it as like you being in the back of a Jeep with whatever kind of gun you wanted, and you could just shoot whatever you wanted, and they like would just take the hide. Like it was poaching. It wasn't trophy hunting, and it's not hunting at that point either.
Exactly, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they use like I think hunting is like the conservation standpoint of being able to take an animal and like for like the good of it. You know what I mean? Like if you're hunting either for food or for sport, but that sport hunting is like
Yeah, if it's in
usually
the name
helping.
of population control, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to do some research on some like principles of hunting, and like a lot of hunters in like America want to give it's like a fair chase doctrine or whatever, where they want to give the animal like a fair shot. So it's like, don't go after wounded animals, or don't go after animals during these months or whatever where they'd be at a severe disadvantage. So it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
So
Okay, so
What was so funny?
it's just mostly been
because
me and
they
Mina
were just-
talking.
Oh,
they were just like going off about it, so I was just kind of like laying back.
yeah. afraid to say anything.
Yeah, I was like,
So
the
now
one
we're gonna give Justin a chance to like talk.
Yeah.
I literally, and then I went to talk, and I was like, why is nobody answering me? And then I realized I was muted.
Oh.
And that was like 3 minutes ago, so I was kind of beat there.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like,
Okay.
I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, damn, nobody's listening to me.
Oh my gosh. All right. I think we have everything figured out though
You're
now.
on question 5.
Yes, I think what's the best like pairing for males and females.
Yeah, like the personality.
Yeah.
Where do we find that?
That was in-
I'm looking at the IELC guide for like black rhinos.
I think also that article that had the pages that referred you to it might draw you into it. But yeah,
Is it Hutchinson
Yeah,
and Krager?
Okay.
Okay.
Apparently a lot of their pairing, according to this, has to do with their defecation habits. So a male will follow a female that he thinks is going to be receptive to her, and he'll scrape her dung vigorously, which means that he flings it far away from her every time she defecates, so that other males aren't able to follow her scent.
That's pretty crazy.
That's crazy.
I mean, I guess it's
And-
extremely smart. It's
Yeah.
working, I
And
guess.
I think it says that there has to be an assertive female.
Yeah, that's
a
what I'm
submissive male.
saying. It looks like it has
Yeah.
to deal with the female receptivity and not like the males. It has to do more with like if the females like feeling it.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a tricky business. It seems like these guys, well, guys and girls have like strong personalities. It's not like you can put
Yeah.
them in the cage and they're just gonna like be in the mood, right? That you have to
They-
really like plan and
Which
the
is-
zoos have to find like, well, these are timid rhinos and these are really aggressive rhinos and
Oh my gosh, so they have to like match them,
Yeah.
like matchmaking
and ship
rhinos.
them across zoos. Yeah, because they can kill each other. Yeah, they can be, really, really brutal and aggressive.
It's kind of cool to see because most animals it's kind of just like more of like the mating aspect, not because like
Yeah.
they're not doing it because like they a lot of animals do it.
Personality
Like the-
thing.
like
Yeah.
the girls are like
They
yeah.
really go through a lot to mate.
They do. Yeah, it's kind of scary.
Is that why like their numbers are kind of low too? Because it's like hard, like I guess
Yeah, I would
because
think
like I guess they have less mates and they don't just kind of like settle because
Yeah, and they're
And more, like,
solitary.
solitary.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just curious, because I know we're gonna kind of break in a sec, but has anybody, after listening to some of those excerpts, has anybody thought harder about their decision about which way you go on that poll?
I was saying like when we first got in here, I was like, is she gonna make us change our mind? Because
I
she
know.
did this poll, and now I'm
No,
thinking,
I'm just curious. I mean, totally, if you still feel firmly, yeah, you stick that way.
I was surprised to learn about like how like they pay for to hunt the rhinos and that actually helps to like protect them
Yeah,
because then
Yeah.
there's like an interest in their species.
yeah.
I just wish there was a different way to do it.
That's how I feel too. Yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of toe that line as well because I want, and I'll say this to the larger group too, I want there to be a better option. Like right
Mhm.
now in North America, really the only means of garnering a ton of money to be able to put it towards, zoos and captive breeding and habitat restoration and reserves is through hunting. And, you can make smart decisions about which individual you'll hunt so that it doesn't negatively impact and can actually help the
Mhm.
wild population. But like, what are the other options? Like, do we make birders pay? Like, do we make wildlife photographers pay? Do when we pay our taxes, do we have a line that says I'm going to donate, 5% of my return to,
Like animals.
conserving wildlife? I know you can
Yeah.
kind of, pick some things to donate to, but that's what I'm like wondering, like, do we have a better option than the system that we have?
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to bounce to the last group and then I'll probably break you guys out.
All
Okay.
right, that's good.
sounds good.
Bye.
Bye. Are you guys back in the main group?
Yeah, we finished.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm curious. I think you were my last group to hone in on. Has anybody had a change of heart?
I think not really. Like, I think we're all still against trophy hunting as like a matter of principle,
Yeah.
but in this particular situation, I see how it can be beneficial. So I guess you just have to take it on a case by case basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm definitely not one to support it, but
Yeah. Yeah, I want to ask the larger group, what is our alternative? Like, it seems that we've worked a system out that hunting is where we get the money to do the conservation work. So where do we find another pot of money? Do we have to internalize? I was mentioning to the other group, do we need to have a line on our taxes that says, okay, take 5% of my tax return and put it towards, wildlife or habitat preservation? I'm just wondering what, if we have a kind of a bad taste in our mouth associated with this, then how can we pose something that will be as effective?
don't know. I think, like, even though it does leave a bad taste in my mouth, I don't know. I think there's always going to be ethical dilemmas when you come through. So I think sometimes we can make concessions in some cases,
Mhm.
and this may be one of those cases. Like, the tax idea is interesting, though. It's as like
Yeah,
a separate thing.
yeah. And you guys, I don't know if you probably haven't had to pay them yet, or maybe, I don't know. Yeah, maybe, because if you're employed, but I feel like in New York State, there's always some line that says you can, donate it to something, that maybe they pick something every year to donate to. I tend to not. I'm going to donate to my kids' college fund, but it is a a question that we might have.
Yeah, but still, even thinking about like how poor, especially this area is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel
And
like maybe auctioning off like the tags almost can maybe bring in more money. Like for the rhino, he paid like $350,000. That's like a lot.
yeah, that that one animal maybe did more for its species than any one organization.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it definitely can be beneficial to conservation in some cases, but I think there should be like, it shouldn't just be a free for all. Like,
Yeah. I'm gonna break everybody out now, so one sec. Yeah, it's tough to know. Like you said, Naomi, when we've covered some of this, it's one of those like moral sticky situations that is important for us to have, because it reminds us that we, are ethical, or, we struggle with things. So it must be important. It must be meaningful. It's not snowing out my window. You guys are all in different locations. It's still snowing where you are?
A
I
little
feel like
bit.
it's like wet snow.
Yeah. I'm
It
hoping
was
it's,
all morning here, just stopped.
yeah, I'm hoping it's subsided and passed through at this point. All right, looks like we are all back. I'm gonna put that poll up, and feel free, vote your conscience. Don't vote like Danielle's, trying to strong arm you. Here we go. It can be exactly the same as it was before. I'm just curious. Okay. All righty. I am gonna share screen and show you. How interesting. You guys see that? So this poll right here was you guys last time, and this is you guys now. Can you see it? Am I sharing?
I think that's on the same one as last time, like the first one.
Yeah, we're only seeing the first one, I think.
Oh. Hold on one sec.
Oh, now it's popping
There we
up.
go. That's interesting. So talk to me about this. Talk to me about your thoughts on it. For those of you that switched your decision, what changed?
I had no at first, and then I switched it to undecided
Yeah.
because it's just a really hard. It's
is.
really hard, because I don't want that to be the way that it is. I don't want it to be like, oh, we only protect these animals like if there's people that like pay to kill them.
Right.
Like I don't know what else we can do right now though.
Yeah. So taking the wildlife biologist standpoint, right? So the wildlife biologist would say, Namibia has decided, so like their fish and game department has decided we're going to remove this aggressive adult male. He's post-reproductive. He serves no purpose except for being. He's a living being that should be kind of, respected. However, he's harming his species by potentially mauling females, going after the young, and competing for resources with the rest of the population. That's the group that would be moving that population forward. So in a sense, removing this, and having an N-1 might bump the reproductive rate of those kind of left behind, sort of that self-thinning idea. So that's sort of that biologist perspective. I mean, the hunters, obviously, this is infusing, money and support in their local village, supporting their families, that sort of thing. And for the trophy hunters, at least the guy that we listened to, he very much stated that he got really emotional. You guys heard that he wants us to understand that he's doing this for the species. He wants the species to be around in the long term for like his family, his kids to see and whatnot. He feels really strongly that he's been put in this position and blessed with this money to be able to participate in this. And it's his kind of like moral obligation to do it. So I know a lot of us still feel like it's a tricky decision. I mean, I think maybe a lot of you understand more that the money is just not going to maybe the wrong people. The money does get filtered back into the local community and also to support the animals in the long term. And it's a lot of money. But I'm wondering, do you have any other thoughts on what an alternative would be? Where do we find a pot of money like this that could help them if we still are kind of on the fence about the hunting? Anybody? Nobody? Somebody's got to have something to say.
My thoughts would be like, I think the reason that hunters feel so passionately about protecting species is because they generally have a deeper connection to them because they spend time around species in the wild. So you need to have another group that feels that kind of passion about species.
Yeah.
I don't know what other kind of group would, other than just environmentalist in general.
Yeah. Yeah. You go back to that Aldo Leopold kind of philosophy that you have to connect with the land. You have to spend the time there in order to appreciate and to, respect something. You need to have watched it, observed it, spent time with it, right? And certainly when people hunt, they do, for the most part, go out and spend a lot of time watching and waiting and stalking and understanding the biology and ecology of them to be able to do that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, there have been suggestions about extra taxes on things like binoculars and spotting scopes and cameras and whatnot to offset, because you're using these wild lands for another purpose. You're not taking, but you're observing, which could also be altering animals' behavior. And I do feel like a lot of the people that are photographers and people like us that spend time in nature, probably are more thoughtful about our spending habits, and that we maybe pause and consider perhaps donating to a cause like this. There's actually I'll try and find it and send it to you guys. There's New York State DEC has a new patch. I think it costs $5, and it's to preserve land, to preserve some of these natural spaces. Now, Tierney, you're involved in the park system. Have you heard of this patch? It's new, like fairly new in the last few years.
No, I haven't heard of this one, but I've heard of like other ones that like when you buy like say your hunting pass or whatever, like you can pay like an extra $5 and get get a patch that kind of helps with conservation.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to look into that and maybe share it with you guys. But anyways, any last minute comments? I mean, it has made us maybe think about it a little bit deeper. I know this is kind of the same experience when we take people to the taxidermist. You know, they have a belief system initially, and then you kind of spend some time with the taxidermist talking to them. You can kind of really engage and understand their appreciation for the animal and wanting to preserve the animal, and again, spending the money on these hunts, knowing that the money is going to helping the species, is sort of, you know, the philosophy that they try and share with all of us. And oftentimes it does kind of open other people's minds. And you know, it's still a very difficult thing for us to kind of, you know, because we're very deeply rooted in our, you know, thoughts on these kinds of topics.
I just have there's another species that it kind of falls into that like hunting endangered species thing.
Mhm.
I don't know what it is, so I'm just asking if you know anything about it. It's a species of sturgeon, and they're endangered, but I know that you can get permitted to harvest them. I think they're like in Minnesota or something, or the Great Lakes.
Oh, is it the Alabama sturgeon? It was maybe one of the ones on our list of triage species.
Maybe I don't know.
It's in one of the many lakes in Alabama.
Yeah, but you can. It's endangered, but you can hunt them.
Yeah. All right. Without any other last minute comments. Okay.
It was Minnesota sturgeon, I believe.
Oh, is it?
Yep.
Well, that would make sense. Okay. I'm going to try and download this so we can save that picture. Okay. All right. Good stuff, you guys. I want to get us a little bit into our climate change. And I know Alex has an article to catch us up on. Alex, you're going to be able to do that right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So Alex has an article. It's called "Are We Eating the World's Megafauna to Extinction?" So it kind of finishes up our overexploitation. I'm going to get the screen share over to you.
Well, let me just tell my friend to turn the music down real quick.
Okay.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
What was the chat from Tierney? It was a habitat stamp.
Oh, this could very well be the one that I was thinking of. Let me see. Yeah, there's a habitat stamp. Let me.
Yeah,
Can you
that's
guys
the thing
see
I
it?
was talking.
Can you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but New York State had one too. I think I posted it on my Dr. Danielle Facebook page. It was specifically from the DEC. This looks like it might, oh, this is the DEC. So that's got to be what it is this habitat stamp. I'll get you more information on it and I'll send it to you guys in an email. Might be a good thing for us to look into as a group. Thank you, Tierney. Okay, Alex, ready when you are.
All right. Where is it? You guys see that?
No.
Oh, you can't?
No. Oh, now I can. Can you
can?
guys see it? Yeah, is
Yeah.
your buddy still playing music? Any chance you can?
Yeah. Actually, let me just go to a different room because he's like, he can't
Okay.
hear me right now.
There's a lot of good graphs in this lecture, in this handout, paper that he's got.
Sorry about that. I live in like a frat house, so that's
Gotcha.
yeah, everything's just wild. Yeah. All right. So I did an article about the overexploitation of megafauna. And hold on, why can't I? Oh, there we go. So if you guys didn't know, megafaunas are large giant animals that inhibit like large areas, habitats, or geological periods. Some examples of megafauna are like elephants, giraffes, whales, and the ones that already are extinct are like saber-tooth tigers, mammoths, and like giant sloths. So here on the left, those are the largest megafauna groups in that you find in each major vertebrate group. So you have like the whale shark, giant salamander, elephant, the leatherback turtle, and a ostrich. And I forgot the name of this one, but it's close to extinction.
Can we just pause and look at that giant salamander, everyone?
Yeah. Things like half the size of his body.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Hold on, let me close that. Shoot. So human activity all over the world is leading megafauna to go extinct. The rate of extinction for megafauna is around it's 70%. 70% are on like a steady decrease, while 59% are threatened with extinction. And the main focus is to like prioritize conservation strategies in order to like combat this and reverse the effects of megafauna extinction. One of the main leading factors that causes vertebrae to go extinct are overexploitation, so like hunting hunting them for their resources, and habitat loss. With human population gradually increasing, the effects of human impact that led to pollution, pathogens, invasive species, and global climate change. Yeah, so that's another like big problem because like even though like we're like doing this like involuntarily, like just no like idea that like our actions are leading to like pollution and increasing global climate change. If this continues to go unchecked, it will lead to a sixth mass extinction event, which will happen in the next century if we don't do anything about it. So in this article, they classify megafauna as they're greater than 100 kilograms. 100 kilograms for mammals, ray finfish, and cartilaginous fish. And for other small animals, it's 40 kilograms, so like birds, amphibians, and reptiles. The methods they use are fish-based, amphibia-web, and amnio database. So for the first figure, they calculated the megafaunas. So all the megafaunas that in those databases, and it shows that 58% of them are threatened, while all the other vertebrates are it's like 21%. And for the percentage that's decreasing, it's 70% of megafauna compared to like 46% for all vertebrae. So really, like nothing's really changing. It's like populations are going through like a steady decrease. For the second figure, it shows a percentage of like why or like how they're affected. So for, let's say, for like the ray finfish, they're or the reptiles, they're mainly harvested for their eggs. Sea turtles are going through like a huge problem with this, which is causing their population to decrease. Invasive species also plays a huge role, wiping out their population and development. For figure 3, this shows the reason why megafauna are being harvested. So the top three reasons why they're being harvested is for their meat, bycatch, and other reasons. So like hunting for like sport and medicine and all that.
Yeah, that medicinal is up there pretty high, which, we talked a little bit, remember the pangolin and harvesting their scales?
Mhm. A species that I'm researching that's going through this is going through a extinction, or the brink of extinction, is a hawksbill sea turtle. This sea turtle lives to more than 50 years and it's spread all throughout the world. But they're mainly hunted for their eggs, shells, and meat. And people are trying to like trying to take a stand and implement like laws to protect these animals, but some of them, some people like go against it and not really care about like the percussions they get from it. One of the resolves that I found it pretty interesting that they found was they designed like LED nets to help turtles like swim free, so like guides them out of like the bycatch of fisheries. And they banned illegal trade of turtle shells and meat.
So I think the LED nets are actually the TED nets that we talked about in our last lecture, turtle exclusion devices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like helps guide them, which I think is like pretty cool, because like a lot of animals like dolphins, sea turtles, they all get like caught up in like the bycatch of those fishery nets. So now they have like a way to, guide themselves out of it.
Yep.
The results conclude that megafauna species are more threatened and have a relatively higher percentage of decreasing populations than all vertebrae together, which is kind of sad. And of the 39,000 vertebrate species in the IUCN Red List, 21% are cataloged as threatened, and 46 have a decrease in population. So even though megafauna species are like more threatened than vertebrate species, vertebrates are like catching up to them. And one of the main reasons why all these species are being hunted is for like meat consumption. Yeah. Other leading reasons for harvesting megafauna include medicinal use, unintended bycatch in fisheries, live trade, and various other uses of body parts such as skins and fins. About 64% of the threatened megafaunas were listed by Convention on International Trade and Endangered Species because of the threats involving them. So by prioritizing conservation strategies, there's still a chance to ensure the survival of Earth's remaining megafauna in terrestrial, marine, and freshwater environments. So to conclude, megafaunas all over the world are going extinct due to human activity, whether it's overharvesting, habitat loss, or even displaying non-intentional effects like climate change and pollution. So if we don't do anything about this, in the next 50 to 100 years, thousands of megafauna species will go extinct. By prioritizing conservation strategies, there's still a chance to ensure the survival of Earth's remaining megafauna in terrestrial, marine, and freshwater environments. And yeah, that's the end.
Good job. Good job. Very thorough. Good. There were good figures in there. Yeah. And just as a kind of a summary at the very end, they state we can predict maybe 7 out of 10 of the largest, most iconic fauna will experience further declines in the near future. And 3 out of 5 of those will go extinct, resulting in like trophic cascades throughout many different communities, whether they're on land or in marine or freshwater systems. And they also ended by talking about humans as the super predators. I know we've been considered keystones in the past and top predators as well. But they mentioned, that we have weapons that we can use at a distance. We have a large range and we have a massive population size. So we really have to kind of think of ourselves in that chain within our community and consider what our roles are. So great job. Nice job, Alex. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to get us started on climate change right now, and we've got a couple of articles to discuss. We may or may not get to all of them today, but we'll just get through as much as we possibly can. Okay. All right. So much of this is review, but I've pulled in some articles that I found in my research along the way. We've already talked a little bit about COVID and pollutants, but there's also kind of a trend with climate as well. Can you guys see the slides okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to kind of historically look back, kind of a little geology lesson. It's a good refresher for me too. So back in the Cretaceous period, when we had our dinosaurs, lots of ferns, vascular plants, lots of organisms out there sequestering the carbon dioxide. So pulling in the carbon dioxide like a carbon sink, right? Low rates of decomposition given the atmospheric composition. And over time, as those plants would die, we have a buildup of the peat, which obviously is, decomposing plant material under pressure over time. And we've got our fossil fuels, that's sort of the source of the fossil fuels. So that's what it was like in the Cretaceous. Now in the Tertiary, we have larger tree species rather than the ferns and so on. We've got, again, continued carbon sink, and we also have limestone rock acting as a carbon sink as well. So again, we're pulling in the carbon dioxide. In the Pleistocene, this would be our glacial period, limited decomposition occurring, and then there was this interglacial period with high rates of decomposition as things began to warm. This cycling apparently stopped about 10,000 years ago. So you can see there's, vast changes in what was going on in the atmosphere, then resulting in a change in our land plants and animals. And so I found this article last year that I thought was kind of interesting, some interesting take homes just to note here. I've got some graphs, nothing to kind of focus on, but let's look at the take homes here. The finding was that plants and animals have similar niche breadths and rates to help explain why local extinctions from climate change have occurred similar frequencies for plants and animals so far. And species with broader niches and faster rates are better able to survive climate change over the next 50 years. So we have to consider niche breadth, whether these organisms are sort of more generalist and adaptable versus more specific and niche focused. And so they gave kind of this middle paragraph I thought was interesting. So finding that species are adapted to a narrow range of temperatures in the tropics, right? There's so much vertical structuring, right? There's so many species. It's very biodiverse. There are a lot of specialists in the tropics. And so it explains why there's higher frequencies of extinctions in the tropics as compared to in the temperate zones. Even though the warming trends might be similar in these higher latitudes, we tend to see those very kind of, niche specialists that are a bit more vulnerable in the tropical areas. So we tend to also see that animals and species that have more difficulty adapting to hotter and temperatures and drier conditions, those are the ones that are going to be in greater trouble than those that are in the cooler and wetter conditions. So again, particularly difficult time adapting to increasing temperatures and droughts that are related to global warming. So there seems to be a moisture and temperature regime, and any organism that isn't well adapted to that is gonna be in trouble, but more so focused on extinctions in the tropics. So what's our current evidence of climate change? Again, things that you guys have likely seen, we're looking at global warming, temperature change over time, and this is being modeled out to 2100 here. We're seeing things like an increase in 1.5 degrees Celsius. We're seeing the ice caps all melting, so the salinity of the ocean is changing. The sea level is rising and inundating areas, and organisms all over the place are shifting their migration patterns, which we're going to cover in a bit. So this IPCC, I'm sure many of you have covered it and looked into this document in the reports that come out of this organization in other classes, but it was a gathering, an original gathering of about 200 experts. They got together, they talked about what is the reason why we're seeing these kind of large climatic changes. Largely, they discussed the issue is a function of anthropogenic changes, things that we've been doing. They focused largely on greenhouse gases. They also talked about, CFCs and removing certain pollutants that we knew would be damaging the ozone and increasing temperatures. And they discuss also how this all kind of plays a role in shifting the weather. This IPCC has a report. It comes out kind of every few years, and it's huge, and there's really good visuals. So I've hyperlinked it there for you guys to check out if you want. So this is just kind of an overview of policy. And I want you to note the huge jump here in time, right? So in 1896, this was the first time anyone seemed to have at least found documentation that they had discussed this idea of climate change and increasing carbon dioxide. So we can see here, there's a connection between the carbon dioxide and atmospheric temperature, suggesting, burning of fossil fuels. But it was largely disregarded by many, and it wasn't, until like 100 years later that anybody actually took some action. So the first World Climate Conference, that started discussing what our role was in climate change happened in '79. A year later, the Montreal Protocol, where leaders met to discuss and focus on things concerning the ozone layer. I mean, you guys are much younger than I am, but I can recall as a kid, I don't know if this is how it was with you guys, but going to McDonald's was like a big, huge treat. You could go and you could sit on they had horses that you could strap yourself into, and you could call Ronald on the telephone, right? These were all these things that we looked forward to as a kid. But I vividly recall that you would get your Happy Meal, and all of it was packaged in styrofoam. Everything was styrofoam, everything was plastic. And then I remember the heated debates about removing this and shifting packaging, trying to kind of limit CFCs and all this this other stuff. I can remember the hairspray and all the CFCs and the chemicals with all those products and them being phased out over time. And so you can see there shortly thereafter, the IPCC kind of gathered together, began discussing this, kind of formulating a plan, discussing how to move forward with it. There was the Rio Convention, where they again had everybody sign on to consider making reductions in these developing nations in their use of fossil fuels and how to deal with greenhouse gases. And you can see over time, there are meetings. There are meetings where everyone's gathering, they're discussing, having all these countries sign on to reduce their use. And then over time, countries agree to and then, walk away from. And the Kyoto Protocol, most people had signed on to it, except some of the larger groups. The larger countries hadn't. I think Russia being one of them. Russia and Japan yet to ratify the treaty. So, moving on, we're down here in 2007. That was kind of a big turning point in the environmental movement. Al Gore released his movie Inconvenient Truth, where we really had to we could sit back and watch and see In 2008, this was actually kind of surprising to me. The polar bear listed as an endangered species. I thought it would have been a lot earlier than that. Notice Alaska sues over this decision. Here we've got the ice sheet breaking up, a massive ice sheet in Greenland breaking up. You can imagine, you know, what that meltwater will do. Alaska's redrawing its border as ice is melting and permafrost is melting, and villages are having to relocate as a result of this. And in 2010, we noted that it was the warmest decade on record. So you can see we've had a couple more reports that have been released since that time. And there's a link here to kind of a timeline, a visual timeline of all these events that have occurred. The Paris Agreement, remember, if you recall, the Paris Agreement, we had signed on under the Obama administration, then Trump walked away from it, and now Biden has signed back on to the Paris Climate Accord. To really focus on climate change. So in terms of our greenhouse gases, we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about what's going on with carbon, what's going on with methane, not so much the water vapor, but, you know, all of these are things that are, you know, gases that occur naturally. They keep us regulated at a typical temperature. It's just when we exploit things a bit too much that we see things kind of shift. So the Industrial Revolution, the mechanized age, right, our increase of greenhouse gases, shifting sort of from that baseline. Methane versus carbon dioxide. Again, methane is a gas that has a much more impactful effect on the atmosphere than does carbon dioxide. It's 100 times more potent. It does break down fairly quickly as opposed to, say, carbon dioxide, which can take, you know, over 100 years to break down. But methane, when we think about methane, we're looking for pockets of methane. We're looking at, you know, burning of grasslands and forests, the rice paddies where we've got a lot of microbes, methanogenic microbes, methane seeps in the deep ocean, and also what's happening in the permafrost, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So again, we've got a situation where we're starting to maybe see a shift and a lot more methane that we have to consider, which is a worse greenhouse gas to deal with. There are some cool organisms out there. And I think Tierney has looked at some cores, some soil cores in the past. If you core the sediments in the ocean, you can look at foraminifera. So you guys remember diatoms and those other kind of silicate-based organisms where their shells actually are pulling in a signature of carbon. And so they can actually track the fluxes of methane if you were to core those sediments and leave this isotopic kind of signature. So you'll notice they use the mass spec. These scientists do that. They're looking at the carbon isotope in the fossilized shells, and they're noticing that this new technology can be pretty useful, right? Gas hydrates, an icy form of methane trapped in a cage of frozen water, and they contain in the ocean sediments. However, hydrates are susceptible to melting if the ocean temperatures change. The stability of these gas hydrates is under investigation to look at how climate change is occurring here. Combination of carbon, oxygen, sulfur isotopes found in these foraminifera can reconstruct the methane released in the geological past. And it's offering us a connection between methane seepage in those deep sediments, climate, and these tectonic processes. And what they have found, at least these researchers have reported, is that there was a strong fluctuation in methane at the sampling site that would suggest that there was an abrupt period of cooling and then warming during this period of time. So again, just another organism that is helping to kind of recreate the climate historically, which is pretty neat to see. Another thing to note, again, these boreal lakes. So we are not far from a lot of these boreal lakes. Many of them are in the Adirondack Park, right? And what people are noticing is that there has been an increase in ice-free days. I mean, we can speak to that with our Lake Champlain, right? It is not freezing over as often as it used to. What does that mean when we don't have that ice there? Lakes account for 10% of the boreal landscape. And they're responsible for about 30% of the biogenic methane emissions that have, been found. So we're looking to kind of evaluate the amount of methane in these lakes. So this is in Finland. So they looked at these Finnish lakes. They found that methane will increase by 26 to 59% by the end of this century, depending on the warming scenario. Boreal lakes remain a significant methane source. Increase in methane emissions depends on latitude, and the increase is greater from lower latitude northern lakes. This study shows the importance of modelers and experimentalists and so on and so forth. So again, people may not be considering the fact that, there's a lot of methane and methanogenic bacteria in the bottom of our lakes. And if we have less ice, we're going to have more of that methane emitted. So it's something that we have to really consider as we begin kind of forecasting with models what our climate's going to look like in the future, and try and deal with that, right? Other contributors, nitrous oxides, sulfur dioxides, the CFCs, which we know were banned, as I mentioned back, I remember when I was growing up, and then low atmospheric ozone. I know many of you guys might have driven through cities in the summertime when you've seen signs that, suggest to limit your time outside because of high levels of low atmospheric ozone. Additionally, we need to think about particulate matter. So I know that there's a lot of online maps and available GIS data sets that look at particulate matter of different sizes. And this is really what Eric Liebensberger was doing with a lot of his research before he came here to our college. So when he was at MIT, he was looking at this. So eruptions and, volcanic eruptions, which there's a lot of them these days, in addition to increased, burning of fossil fuels, spewing this particulate into the atmosphere, and then it's transported on these currents, and they end up in our areas. And so it's been interesting to see this research that this extra particulate in the atmosphere is creating more and trapping more water vapor. We've got these clouds, and then there's areas where you'll find, and I'm going to let me pull you'll find cooling as a result of that. Right there. So here we've got Mount Pinatubo, and we've got this eruption in 1991, 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide and ash particulate that blasted 12 miles into the atmosphere, widespread destruction, lots of loss of life, and so on. And it did impact global climate change. It lasted only a few days, lots of outpouring of these sulfuric gases and sulfur aerosols. And they note it causes, these volcanic eruptions cause short-term climate change, and it contributes to the natural climate variability. So normally you can build that into a model of climate change, and then you tend to add on what human impacts would exacerbate as well. So these researchers looked at the aerosols. They followed the aerosols for 2 years following this eruption, and they compared the climate simulations between the eruption with and without aerosols, and they found a general cooling of the troposphere and a clear warming pattern of surface air in certain other areas. The modeling of temperature is consistent with anomalies that were observed after the eruption. The normal pattern of winter warming followed the volcanic eruptions, practically identical to the winter surface changes. And so, this idea that man-made or anthropogenic emissions can make the consequences of volcanic eruptions much more severe is important to note. So I wanted to show you in the next, I believe it's maybe the next slide, or maybe I don't have a visual of it. I thought this one had a visual of it. But you can see that the warming trend that we tend to note is occurring, largely all over the place. In areas where we have, eruptions, and in areas where we have more industrialization, we tend to see that warming tempered a bit. due to the increase in cloud cover as a result of this extra particulate in the atmosphere. So there's zones of cooling as a result of this stuff. All right, a lot of the work that's been done to kind of reconstruct the climates come from ice cores, drilling into the ice sheets, finding the pockets of air and being able to analyze it. It can help to determine over time what the trends have been. But generally what we have noted, right, is that the ice core data, as well as just the atmospheric collection of stuff that's been occurring in Hawaii, as that's been monitored from 1960 onward, it trends exactly the same. So before the observatory in Mauna Loa, they were using the ice cores to reconstruct the gas. So looking at carbon dioxide trends as well as temperature. And now they're largely using the observatory over in Hawaii. But again, the trend is pretty much 1-to-1. So carbon dioxide, again, tracking with temperature. And they're noticing that most of these trends are a little bit more dramatic in these higher latitudes and also on larger continents. So if you think about, you know, Canada and the Arctic is where a lot of this climate research has been focused. If we look at the US, though, there are some trends that we can note right off the bat. Black, anytime your dot here is black, that represents a place that's warming. Anywhere it's gray, it seems to be cooling. Again, think about what we talked about with increased pollutants, the particulate matter in the atmosphere. Are there any areas around here that you can consider, you know, perhaps would be industrial areas or areas where the atmospheric circulation belt would trap some of the particulate, you know, between like mountain ranges and things like that. And then the dot size is a function of the magnitude of that trend. So we see a ton of warming here in the northeast coast, right? And then we also are seeing it up higher and in the California area where droughts and fires have been pretty common, and cooling down in these other spots. The trend's not been uniform, as I mentioned. The northern spots seem to be kind of feeling the effects a little bit more so. You can see the large continents in the northern spots in terms of temperature, and precipitation also has been changing. Some areas have been getting more wet, obviously, and some more dry. Now, remember we were talking about those climate models, you know, and thinking about natural forcing. So that would be like the volcanic eruptions and that sort of thing. If we only modeled temperature as a function of the typical things that occur, you know, the solar activity, the eruptions, this is what we've got going on for trend. It's pretty stable. And so that now we're considering, you know, models that also are forecasting what we have done, our contributions. And that seems to fit the data much more strongly. It's not just natural forcings, as we mentioned, it's what we are doing to the climate. And this article kind of gives us some scenarios, okay? So if we have rapid economic growth, right? And then if we decide that we're gonna kind of mid-century peak with our growth, and if we consider our technological advances, if they're rapid, okay, we're gonna forecast out what our climate scenario will be, okay? If it's rapid growth, and we use a ton of fossil fuels, we're going to be experiencing the worst situation here with greenhouse gases. Okay, so where do we fall? This is where we fall, right? This is where we're falling right now. High use of fossil fuels. We can predict that we're going to have issues with this greenhouse gas. Again, this is all derived from a model as a function of what's being reported in the IPCC report. And what does that mean when we think about temperature change and sea level rise? Well, if we follow that scenario, again, where we're using a lot of fossil fuels, we have peaked, you know, mid-century on our population size. We've got an increase from between 2.5 to 6.5 degrees on our temperature, and an increase in sea level rise by about 0.26 to 0.59 meters. So significant, very significant, if things continue the way that they have. And what will that mean sort of long term? And I mean, what can we predict? Notice all of these: likely, virtually certain, more cyclones, heavy precipitation events, droughts, right? Fluctuations in, in daytime temperature versus nighttime temperature, high sea level rise, and tsunamis, right? All of this we can expect to occur more frequently under that climate scenario that we are seemingly kind of following at this point. One thing to note, though, not all hope is lost. There's been studies, this one was from 2015, but there's been studies that suggest that organisms are fairly adaptive. I mean, this is an example with fruit flies, but I just wanted to take a moment. These researchers have described genetic architecture for long-term acclimation that could transition organisms from summer to winter and short-term acclimatization. So this means, this could happen with a single day or a snap freeze, or how sometimes we get the polar vortex that comes in, but it's been warm right before it. So, we've got a lot of organisms that show that they can kind of deal with this seasonal acclimation, but they can also deal with a rapid, quick snap in extreme weather as well. And it seems like these flies, have done a good job in being a candidate organism. They're actually looking at their genome to see, under these events, when they're exposed to these sorts of conditions, what genes turn on, right? Which genes get expressed during that period of time. So they can have sort of a blueprint to maybe see if we have those genes and how that might give us an opportunity to adapt to those sorts of conditions as well, because we know it's going to be happening a bit more frequently. Now, more locally, what do these trends in climate seem to kind of confer? We've got temperature, we've got precipitation down here at the bottom. The blue up here is Burlington temperature. So obviously the trend that we're seeing over time has been that Burlington's become warmer. And in terms of precipitation, we can see that it has become, actually it's not wetter, it's become drier. I have to fix that. I was looking at the wrong one. This is the averages in the red, and the Burlington is in the blue. So we are lower, we are on the lesser precipitation end. So warmer and drier. So what does that mean, right? We live in maple country, right? What does this sort of long-term condition mean? We also have fish, as sport fish is a big part of our economy in this area, in addition to leaf peeping, right? So you can imagine periods of drought and periods that are warmer is likely going to impact the quality of the foliage that we see in the fall, and the long-term persistence of our deciduous trees, right? So all of this stuff could kind of have an economic impact in our region. Climate change and sea level rise. So this is just a visual here of what's going on in Florida. And you can see that, there's serious coastal flooding and inundation. You can think about where the resort towns are located. Why is it happening? Thermal expansion as the glaciers are melting, the ice sheets are melting, and we're losing ice packs up on the mountains. And that tends to kind of shift what we're seeing. You'll see sea level rise in all of these major countries, seems to be on an increase, right? We've got sea level rise. You can see the darker is the higher inundation. So this is over in North Carolina and these barrier islands. And then when we look at ocean temperatures, right? This is Scripps, California, Santa Barbara, California, places where people go to visit. And you can see that the sea surface temperatures have risen as well, along with sea level rise. All right, I'm going to stop there, you guys. We'll pick up with climate on Tuesday of next week. And we'll have the presentations for the folks that were assigned the climate material then. Just a reminder, your reports, the rough drafts are due technically today. So in the next day or so, if you guys could drop those in the Dropbox, I'll get you guys comments on those as soon as I possibly can. Have a good Easter, everybody.
You too. Thank you.
All right, bye guys. See ya.